first Love Tutoring Festival, he asked me, have you been outside today? The answer was no, I had not been outside. The second of our people is Sean. Let me find Sean. And Sean is the co-founder of Groe Global, an international franchising consultancy and a 360 growth and development service that do everything that your business needs to build and innovate its brand. Franchising is huge in education, and Groe Global work in that sector, as well as in fashion, retail, finance, social media. And I think we can definitely learn by involving ourselves in those other industries as well and taking what they have to give us. Now, I'm going to have a bit of a fangirl moment next because we've got Sarah Dunwood. Sarah was one of the inspirations for me starting off as a tutor. So thank you very much. She's an ex-deputy head teacher, Senko, business studies teacher of 26 years. And she's working for Conexus, which is the best of both her worlds. She still gets to work with young people, but she's also using her business skills at the same time. She's got the overarching responsibility for the franchise operations across the UK. If you have been watching Conexus, you will know over the last couple of years, how much they have grown. And so Sarah's doing an incredible job there. Her main role is to develop individual businesses of franchisees so that they grow and scale to maximum capacity, reaching as many young people as possible. She's proud to be responsible for the training and development of the principal directors, but more importantly, her role is to ensure the exceptional quality of tuition is maintained across all of her classes. Thank you very much to the three of these people. We are going to now hand over to them and find out what we should expect from a franchisor.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah. So I am in the enviable position of, again, being a learner rather than a talker in this particular talk. But yeah, again, thanks so much for joining us, Sean and Sarah. We're very much looking into digging into franchising. Curiously, I think it would be useful, since we're a smaller group, if in the chat you kind of mention what you'd like to get out of this particular talk. And particularly also about your stage of business and whether or not you're thinking of franchising, because I think, again, we can then make this a meaningful conversation to those in the room, plus those that may be watching this recording afterwards. So just, I'll give you a chance just to pop that in the chat as we go. But I think it would be very interesting to make this as relevant as possible. I actually think it would be worthwhile. I'm probably not the only one in the room that is asking sort of, let's start off with the basics, and it'll give us a chance to get to know both of you, Sean and Sarah. What makes good franchising? What does it actually mean to franchise, and why do people get into it? Maybe Sean, I'll start with you, and then Sarah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everybody. Yeah, as Sarah said, I've been in the franchising game for a long time. I'm an ex-board member of the British Franchise Association, and we currently work in 16 countries around the world. Weirdly, one of the countries we don't work in is New Zealand, but we do Australia.
It's slightly far away, it is literally the other side.
Got to be honest, I think I prefer New Zealand to Australia. Better rugby, but But no, so look, franchising is one of those kind of Marmite subjects, and the problem franchising has, as with many other industries, is that the one or two bad apples tend to kind of create a perception around this incredibly successful and incredibly powerful sector. That is very, very powerful, both from a social level as well as an expanding a business level. So, as I said, we work around the world, but the one thing, and I'm going to add the relevance to it. So we have a charity out in Africa called the Foundation of Franchising for Africa, where we're actually helping people get out of poverty by using the principles of franchising. So, franchising itself is a method of allowing business people to be able to expand their business by sharing their knowledge, sharing their experience, being able to help guide, mentor, and teach other people, to effectively just get to where they are quicker, right? So not have to go through all of the learning process, etc., which is easy to underestimate. So anybody who's run their own business realizes the very, the magnitude of the lessons that you have to learn along the way. And when you haven't got to go through all of that, you don't fully comprehend, how difficult that all was. But that being said, franchisors are a unique bunch of people. So it allows you to expand your business. It also gives you the benefits as a business owner to be able to expand, keep the quality as high as possible, but also expand without having to have a massive capital sort of outlay, as you would with a branch network. So just a few statistics around franchising. So if you, as a franchisee, start with a franchisor, and I'm going to, when I say franchisor, I'm speaking about the decent ones, right? Of which I would say the vast majority are. When you start with a franchisor, as a franchisee, your odds of actually succeeding in business, right, over 3 years, according to the latest survey, which is now 2019, I think it was, is 93.7% success rate, right? So 93.7% of all franchisees are not only still in business, but they're profitable after 3 years. I don't know of another industry that could ever say the same thing, right? I don't know of another business, a side gig or anything that could say the same thing. And the reason is that what you get when you join a franchise is you get a full support network. And it's not just a person, it's not just an idea, it's not just this is how you do it. There's a vested interest from the franchisor to continue developing ideas, helping you, supporting you, giving you all the advantages that they never had, when you start your business. So you cannot underestimate the amount of time it will take, as an example, for you starting your own business to figure out how to make your business card. The amount of people that go out of business before they've actually finalized their business card because their name needs to be 2 pixels to the left, 2 pixels to the right. It needs to be not mauve, but one shade lower than mauve. And every day they go home to their partners and they say to them, "Oh my God, I've had the hardest day. I've just launched this business and that designer just does not get me," right? And then they finally get the business card, and then the website's got to be word perfect because everyone reads every word on a website. I'm sure all of you guys do. When you see a website, you go into detail, don't you? So the problem is that people spend a lot of time doing things that actually don't make them money at all. And actually, in the greater scheme of things, don't mean anything. What a franchisor does, if I was to strip away all the politically correct and all the wonderful, verbiage that they use sometimes, what a franchisor's job is to basically eliminate excuses, right? Here's a business card, go and get a client. Here's a website, go and get a client. Here's a brochure, go get a client. All of those things that might take months or years sometimes for people to finally be comfortable with are taken out of the equation, and what you're left with is go and get a client, and that is very, very, very valuable. What I would also say is if you were to ever take a look at the value that a franchisor brings to a franchisee, if you were to go to the open market and go and get that person who's on call on the phone anytime during the week, right? If you were to go and get a quote on the open market for a graphic designer who will create you, a slightly different advert on your Facebook ad any day of the week. If you were to go and get a quote for getting the support network of having, as Conexus does, multiple franchisees, right? Just people who are in your same situation under the same umbrella brand, they've got the same challenges you have. If you were to try and go and get a quote for that, well, you wouldn't find one because it doesn't exist outside of franchising. Relevant people who can talk to you about an actual relevant situation that they share with you. So, you know, when you look, and this is often an objection that people have about franchising, is they say, well, hold on, you know, it's so expensive. You've got to pay 10, 15, 20, 30,000, you know, to be part of this franchise brand. If you were to go and in the open market, do it the way that franchisor has done it, it would be double to triple the cost, you know. So actually, it is a very, very cost-effective way of getting into business. If any of you guys are thinking of franchising your business, right, it is a very, very worthwhile thing to do, because you can genuinely make a massive impact on the life of others. You are able to help people free themselves from challenges that they've got, whether it be workplace or home. You give people the ability to be able to become the master of their own fate. And most importantly, you give them the ability to go on to help recruit and employ many more people, you know, who you know, would otherwise perhaps not have a job. Anyway, that's my little piece about franchising.
I love that, Sean. That was really on point. I think it definitely took us to that kind of point of like, what is franchising? I think what I took out of that was, not only do you have the benefits of fast tracking a lot of the learnings, because those learnings have already been done elsewhere. I got the impression that you have some real cost advantages as well, because you have more buying power when you're part of a franchise, and there are some sort of other areas. Maybe Sarah, can you help us with directing this conversation even a little bit more specifically? What does franchising look like for a tutoring business? What are the actual systems that we often talk about? You know, maybe again, trying to keep fairly general, but looking at what does franchising mean to a tutoring business?
Can I come in on the back?
Of course you can too.
So just because what I really want to say is what franchising isn't, because there is a real misconception and a misalignment on it to do with franchising, that it's like multi-level marketing, and it absolutely isn't. And it's one of the biggest challenges we have. And I'm going to talk at cross purposes as a franchise in terms of onboarding people, but within the community that Sharon and I run as well, there are so many misconceptions about what franchising is, and it absolutely is not multi-level marketing, of which I am not an advocate in any way, shape or form. I despise it. So I just want to put that out there, because quite often the language of franchising can mirror the language that is used within that other sector, and therefore it can muddy the waters a little bit. So it's absolutely not multi-level marketing. What it absolutely is, and I've seen this as a franchisee, and then I've come into the franchisor's business as chief ops officer. It is a really simple and effective way of giving you a head start of about 5 years. That's the simplest way I can put it, because I've come out of teaching. I've tried to set up my own business. Unfortunately, there was a pandemic, but having to do everything, Sean is so right. The nitty gritty is the stuff that you end up getting bogged down in. You spend weeks trying to do a website, creating a logo for yourself and all the rest of it. You come into a franchise, it's handed to you on a plate. And actually it takes all of that noise away from you so that you can focus on what the core purpose is, which is building your business, building a client base, delivering a service. So within the tuition sector is a massively growing sector, and rightly so, because we're no longer the poor relations to teaching. We are being seen as a valid sector. We're contributing. So therefore, there's lots of us moving into the sector and trying to establish ourselves as tiny little fish within a very big sea, where there's lots of us and there's lots of food to go at. But actually, franchising, Sean, you might agree or disagree, franchising kind of gives you the option to become a shark within that sea. actually you've got more power at that point. You can go and you can get established more quickly. So from our point of view, and I do see it, and I am going to say it because I'm COO, but I know that our franchisees say it as well. You walk into a support network, you walk into 25 or 30 franchisees, as we are at the moment, who are all at different points, have all been through the different challenges, have all found different ways to overcome challenges, because you're still running your own business. So you are still going to have challenges. It doesn't make it absolutely smooth sailing, but what it does is it takes out a lot of the bumps. And where there is a bump, there's a whole pile of people who understand in your context specifically what to do, how to solve it, making suggestions, so on and so forth. So I think within our sector, that is so important, because tutoring as an independent tutor, you can be so isolated because we don't have support networks in real terms. So actually it can be really helpful in that regard. And I think the advantage of walking into systems, software, processes, things that have been tried and tested and stress tested, so that when you do it, it doesn't break, because when we've done it, we've gone through all the breakages and solved the problems. I just think that's massive.
I think, if I could just add to that, the reality is exactly, Sarah was saying, because if you've done this yourself and you realize how very, very difficult it is, so Conexus has had some really great success with big governmental contracts and all of those kind of things. Those things happen because of the franchise. Also remember, from the opposite side of the table, the parents, right? In every industry in the world, there's an old saying that says nobody ever got fired for buying from IBM, right? And the reality is that parents are looking for trust signals. And, if they see a brand, something that's established, they've seen it all over the place, right? There's an automatic assumption that it is high quality and it's a safe space for their kids. It's a safe option for their kids. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the next tutor, right, that is independent is in any way inferior at all, But the reality is that the marketing and the brand is very, very important. We must remember that Mozart died a pauper, right? He was the greatest pianist ever, right? Had he had a brand, had he learned how to market himself, had he had all the other stuff that to him were, I suppose, inferior to his craft, why would I possibly do all of this kind of stuff? The thing is that what a brand does is it allows you to actually really become successful and grow into a role. And I think the consumers, especially nowadays, where everything is much more about the trust signals and the brand, etc., it is a very, very, very smart move to either franchise or be in a franchise, because ultimately they do start dominating sectors, regardless of what anyone says.
That was, I think, really interesting on the brand aspect. I think that there is a lot of power there, and as you've kind of mentioned, in the tutoring sector, which is quite fragmented, it can provide some, other signals, right? Particularly if there are multiple branches, it sort of does feel like like you're buying into a network as well as a parent. I wanted to jump into maybe actually even just the characteristics. I think both of you have sort of touched on this, but what sort of and I think particularly on your point, Sarah, what defines the characteristics of more like ethical franchising? Like, what does that look like?
I think from my point of view, it's about how open the franchisor is in terms of the information that they put. So the best thing to do is to give you an example. Any prospective franchisee that has onboarding conversations with us, we put them directly in touch with our franchise network and ask them to arrange, without us present, meetings with different franchisees. We'll try and match in terms of, if it's a maths teacher who's coming to us, then we'll find 3 or 4 of our maths teacher who've gone into franchising, but in different areas, who are doing things different ways, so on and so forth. But we will release into the network in order to allow the network to have a frank conversation without us present, not like Ofsted, so that actually there is some honesty about those conversations, and the network are very frank. I think that that is part of our ethics personally, and I know it's not what all franchisors do, because we've had franchisees come to us who've looked at other franchises and said, oh, we could only have a meeting with the franchisees if the franchisor was there. Now that's a red flag for me, because why would you not want a prospective franchisee to talk to your existing franchisee? So I think ethics, being ethical, is about being open. I think it's those trust signals again, in terms of what are the behaviors of the franchisor. We obviously have to protect our trade secrets. There is a legal relationship, and there's all sorts of stuff that sits around that. But equally, prior to coming on board, we are as open as possible in terms of trying to ensure that that franchisee is making a decision that is right for them. And one of the things that we will not do is take on a franchisee for whom it's clearly not right, or where they are hesitant, because morally that's not right. It's not right to chase the money from the franchisee. It's right to get the right person as part of your network, because to unpick that later on is a much more difficult task. Is that fair, Sean?
Yeah, I would agree. Look, I mean, the thing is, I've had arguments with the British Franchise Association, pretty much everybody, about what does ethical franchising mean? What does it actually mean? I mean, I suppose it's a very similar question to what is ethical tutoring, and is one tutor over another, one more ethical than the other, and who decides that? The fact is that, what Sarah said was exactly right. Transparency is a very, very important thing. Sometimes, I have known franchisors that don't release their franchisees' details because the franchisees are refusing, because they get so many applicants. That's 4 times a day they're getting a phone call from franchisees. My take on ethical franchising is this, right? What the promise that you make is the promise that you keep. So when you say this is what you're going to get as a franchisor, and if you say, look, I'm going to coach you once a year, right, and then you do that, and that was part of the agreement, then to me that is ethical. You're living up to your side of the bargain, and that is what it is. The correct franchising or best practice franchising, I think, is a slightly different thing, because the franchisor needs to live up to their part. They need to be able to provide you with an overarching brand support, the business support, the honesty. Right, the honesty to say to you, listen, you just sometimes just need to just get on with it. All of those kind of things are the things that, in my mind, speak to ethical franchising. In America, they've got this thing called the franchise disclosure document, which is basically the full genetic history of the franchise. So all the founders, every franchisee's name is listed. It's a 150-page document, but they have the same challenges that British franchises have, where it is completely unregulated. My view is what you need to do, right, is when you are thinking about a tutoring franchise, or any franchise for that matter, is you need to go into it. You need to speak to the operations people. So, if I was going to advise somebody to speak to, a franchise, I'd always say to them, look, it's fair. Speak to the CEO, speak to the salesperson. They will get you excited. It's their job, right? They are passionate about their brand. But then what you do is make a point of speaking to the Sarahs, because Sarah doesn't have time to talk rubbish to you, right? She's just like, listen, you either do it or you don't do it, right? If what's the difference between a good franchisee and a bad franchisee? Well, it's very simple. The ones that implement what I say, those are the good ones, right? And those are the successful ones. And that is the thing, like I've personally launched over 1,500 small businesses through franchising. I've seen the habits. I've seen the guys that are successful and not successful. And when you look at it from a bigger picture, it is extraordinary how frequently the most successful franchisees are the people that basically just follow the system, right? They like, look, I don't want to overthink this. I just want to do that. And I'll do it with purpose and determination. And honestly, you cannot believe how frequently those guys are the ones that are the most successful. The people who are the least successful are people like me, right? The creatives. The guys who are opinionated, who come with their own ideas as to how things must run. And like, I don't think that the way you tutor, you structure your tutoring is right. When I was a tutor, I had this way of doing things. Those guys, first 2 years, they really struggle, really struggle. And then eventually they're like, okay, fine, I'll just do what you say. And then they'll shoot back up. So the ethics of franchising is being honest. Don't beat around the bush. In Britain in particular, there's a great habit of going, well, if you tried, when actually what you're trying to say is, could you just get on with it? Because some people respond differently to different types of support, right? You've got to know what that is, because remember, your responsibility as a franchisor, right, is you have promised somebody that you're going to help them feed their families, right? Your responsibility is not to sugarcoat things. Be honest, be straightforward. And I guess in the context of this conversation, I'm going to talk about my teachers that I remember the most fondly from back at school, right? They were always the strict ones, the ones who just told me what I needed to do, right? And held me accountable. And those are the guys that got the most out of me. And those were the guys that made me successful, in my opinion.
I just want to come in on the back of that as well. So 2 things. What Sean is saying is, speak to the dull one who is just detail oriented and doesn't do all singing, all dancing, shiny things. That's me. And there is a lot to be said about that, because that's exactly what we do. Sharon will get on the call and everybody will go, oh my God, it's Sharon. And then I will get on a call a week later and go, bang, 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 bang. This is it. This is how it is. And if that's not right, that's not right. And I think that's massively important. But I think as a potential franchisee, there is a conversation to be had about what's right from your point of view. What's your ethics? Where does our franchise or anybody's franchise sit and align in terms of what's at your core? Because a great franchisee for us aligns with our very clearly defined and stated values and core model. And we have learned our lessons that we don't take in somebody.
I'm sure Sarah will be back. She had an amazing point, by the way, so you're going to love it.
It's got to be right from both sides, and the franchisee has a responsibility to be ethical in their decision making about joining the franchise as well.
Franchising is like a bicycle, right? We provide the bicycle, you provide the pedaling, and that is the reality. If you don't pedal hard, you're not going to go fast, right? If you stop every now and again, you're going to get there after everyone else. And that's the simplest way. I saw a quick question just saying, if I'm a creative, does that mean I won't enjoy franchising? Look, I'm unfortunately one of those people who studied advertising. I've been a creative and one of those frothy mouthed entrepreneurs my whole life. The problem with somebody who is innately a creative person who always wants to push the boundaries and that, what we are is we those guys who go into unknown territory, right? And we test stuff and we break things just to see what's inside and all of that. So when you're talking about creative, if you're talking about the version of creative that I just described, right, where your worst thought in your life is structure, right? That's me. Then you will definitely not enjoy a franchise, 100%, right? Because the franchisor has actually done all of that for you. They've done it, they've proved it, they've made the mistakes, right? If you are somebody who does enjoy structure, but does want to give input and, have a say every now and again, but understands as with teaching, I guess, there's a curriculum, right? If you keep going off the curriculum, you just don't know what the results are going to be, what those kids are going to learn. And that is the answer to that question. So creativity, but there's different levels of creativity. And if you're anything like me, don't go anywhere near franchising as a franchisee, but perhaps you might be an incredible franchisor.
And I jump in on the back as well and say it is franchise dependent, and I think it's possibly sector dependent. And I think even within the business, there's channels where you would have scope for creativity and flexibility, but in other areas you wouldn't. So the actual running of the business and following the method as it's defined, i.e. how the business actually runs, for us, that is very well, it's a swim lane. You stay in your swim lane. You do what that says and it will work. However, we've got quite a flexible model in that depending upon where somebody is and what area and what skills they're bringing, we will then work with them to say, if they bring an idea to us, we go, oh, that's really good. That would work in your area. Go for it. We will give permission. So and again, I think that comes back to being ethical, that we will flex and adapt if somebody brings something to us. So I think it's franchise dependent in terms of creativity, but I think you have to accept that if you are stepping into a franchise, the reason you would be considering that is because the franchise model gives you a whole pile of benefits that you wouldn't have if you didn't. And therefore the sacrifice of creativity might be the trade-off that you need to get all of the other benefits. And that's part of your weighing up as a franchisee.
Fantastic. So I think we've definitely kind of rounded that out with understanding that ethical tutoring or franchising is particularly around this transparency, it's around honesty, and it's around this two-way exchange between the two parties. So I think that was really great to understand. Sarah, I'm particularly interested in maybe again going into it a little bit. I think both of you seem very united on this idea that you're a great fit for us and we're a great fit for you if you're interested in the systems, if that's what you want to buy. I'm kind of curious, what are some descriptions of what a franchisees typically look like? Do they often look like independent tutors? Do they already have their own clients and then they want to go to that next level because they're kind of stuck at a business level? Or what makes them look like they've got the characteristics to take that step into franchising?
Ask me an easy question. Goodness me, Alex.
I only ask hard questions. I've let you guys talk for all that time and I came up with a real hard one. So there we are, Sarah.
We've got 10 minutes. That's an hour-long answer.
I'm actually only going to give you 2 minutes as well. I'm going to cut down the clock.
Right, well, then stop talking and I will talk. Sorry, that was rude. In terms of, we have such a variety, and I would say to you that for us as a franchisor, we have massively refined what our ideal franchisee looks like to us. However, we've got multiple ideal franchisees. Some of them are tutors who've established a beautiful tutoring business of their own, where they are the tutor. So essentially, they have created themselves a job, not a business. And actually, they want to expand, but they can't expand because they haven't got the systems, the framework. It's okay because they're making their money and they're doing great things as an independent tutor, but they can't grow. So that's one of ours. Another one is genuinely teachers who are utterly broken from being in a system and just want a way out of teaching, but have no idea about business. So their escape route is, give me the systems and structure, I will do the hard work. Now they, in real terms, are our best franchisees because they're not shorn, They're not, well, I've done it my way for 2 years. They are, I need to get out. I know this can work. I'm passionate about it. You're giving me the business structure and all of the coaching and all of the rest of it. I will do the legwork, because they're passionate about education, but they're passionate about wanting to get out and build something better for themselves or something different for themselves. So
Sarah,
I think
2 minutes, you just nailed that. I'm gonna.
Is that all right?
You did great there. I'm gonna give the same 2 minutes to Sean. I'm gonna be looking at the clock though. So
Mine's easy.
tell us.
Mine's easy. So Sarah's exactly right. In every franchise around the world, and like I said, we've got franchisors in Hawaii, the UAE, all over the place, Japan even, that we work with, right? There's only 2 characteristics that make a good franchisee, right? It's the only 2 things I ever look for. I never look at a CV. And the thing is that CVs can be written well and they can be written badly. Written well by bad people and written badly by good people, right? So we look for these 2 characteristics. Number 1, teachability, right? Will this person accept instruction, right? So our recruitment process is designed to test whether or not that person will accept instruction, right? The second thing is grit, because as I said, this is a bicycle, right? When there's a big hill, right, are they going to jump off the bike and scream the bike is broken, right? Or they're going to say, man, I need to pedal harder, right? So those are the 2 characteristics. In my experience, the people who do the worst, right, are people like I said, like me, but people from very big jobs, big senior jobs, because they had teams around them before. And small business, as everyone knows, is literally the most difficult type of business on the planet. So, you know, if we get people with great CVs, massively charismatic, say all the lovely things, they interview brilliantly, I get super suspicious. So grit and teachability, those are the 2 things.
So I'm going to jump then into one other thing that I think people are, would think about, and there's a great question here from Sarah, but there does come to that point of sort of brand control and autonomy. I mean, I think there is always that sort of edge of, I don't want to be a widget. I still want to have some sense of creativity and control. Where's that line, and how can people feel comfortable about those expectations?
I think from our experience, obviously, again, it's franchise specific. For us, I think we are quite a flexible franchise. So we have got some very basic brand guidelines in terms of, we've got a logo, we've got 2 specific brand colors, and some guidance around that. But actually then in real terms, our franchisees have flexibility to utilize that within quite a wide boundary. So if you were to go and look across our different Conexus pages, which are all run by our franchisees, we're admins on them, so we can lock them out, but they run them. You can see the corporate brand through it, but you can see individuality as well in terms of how that's being played out. And I think I don't have experience of other franchises within our sector apart from what I see on the outside. And what I see on the outside from other franchises is very strict brand control, whereas there is something, I am fundamentally the complete antithesis of Sean in real life, that I am the creative, scattergun, mess everywhere. I am not process oriented in real life. I like to be messy, and then a lot of our franchisees do. They're ex-primary teachers. They want to be creative. They want to laminate things. So we tap into that. We absolutely tap into that because that's right for our brand and our organization. But others might not do that.
There's a lot of reason for that, and as franchises grow, that reason becomes more and more and more apparent. One of the big jobs that we do right now for franchise networks is reputation management. Right. So as you guys all know, the reality is one unhappy client who may or may not have a point. Quite often, the other side of the story is not told. Could just go anywhere onto any social media platform or anything like that, and they could start saying all kinds of horrible things, right? The reality is that sometimes the brand guidelines, what it does is it protects the network. So it's not about the individual anymore. It's about the good name of the whole network. Because I've had situations, and I'll give you a really quick example where we had all franchisee calls were recorded just literally for quality purposes. We never listened in or anything like that. But on this odd occasion, I actually did go in and listen. And there was this one franchisee, not even going to say which part of the world he was from, but the customer called, he answered the phone, and he literally just said hello. Anyway, this poor lady, she's like, oh, I'm sorry, is this, have I got the right number? Is this this company? And he's like, yes, like that. Now, bearing in mind, there were 40 other franchisees, right? That were all, close to him, far away from him, whatever, right? So this is the impression that the whole group is getting, or this lady is getting about the whole group. He then, she said, look, can I get a quote? He then said, oh, just at the bottom of my garden, just hold on, right? Walked up and you could hear the grass, right, going as he was walking. Got to the house, screamed into the house, can somebody get me a pen, please? You could hear he was holding it against his chest, but he was like properly irritated. Anyway, so this lady was, and it's a rival cities, football rival city. They've got a very strong rivalry. And this lady was from the other city, right? And he asked her for her address. She starts telling the address. And actually, it was in one of these homes for ladies who've had to move out of their home situation because of violence or whatever. And he didn't know, but he found out that the address was at this other city, and he said, sorry, I can't help you. I don't go there. We don't like people from there. Literally like that, on the phone, right? Turned out she was friends of the mayor of that other city. She was a very influential person, and this is where it can go wrong, where brand guidelines are very important. That lady could have had lunch with her friend, the reporter, on the Friday, who said, oh, that's awful. I'm going to do a little write-up, tiny little local newspaper, and checked out that franchisee and saw, oh, hold on, that franchisee is part of something slightly bigger, right? And then went and said, oh, look, there's a franchise, but wait, hold on, that franchise is actually owned by this other bigger fish, right? And suddenly, every single franchisee, right, in the whole network is accused of being biased, right, and like hate crimes or whatever. So there's reasons franchisors do things. It seems at first glance as a very inappropriate and Stalinistic type of approach, but in reality, it is exactly the opposite. And I think I'll close off just by one other point. When you read a franchise agreement, right, it is unbelievably biased. Right? It is totally one-sided with very little wiggle room for a franchisee. And at first glance, again, it appears that the franchisor, is just trying to do this total control situation. But if you think about the example I just gave you, that franchise agreement is not written for the protection of the franchisor. It's written for the protection of the network.
That was great. Thanks, Sean. So we've got about sort of almost coming up to our sort of 10-minute window. And I'm wondering also if there's anyone that has questions, please pop them in. I think let's start off though with just some more sort of getting into what are some top tips though for a tutor that's thinking of taking on a franchise. Maybe let's just number off like one tip from either of you. Maybe Sarah, you want to start us off, and then we'll go at Sean. We'll see if we get any other further questions, and then we can either have some more time for further tips, or we can answer some of those questions. So Sarah, what would be a top tip for a tutor that's considering on taking a franchise?
You have the responsibility for doing your due diligence and researching. Dig, dig, find out as much as you can before you even get on a call with anybody.
I mean, we could dig into that, but that just seems, I do want to spend a moment just to let that sink in. This is a really important agreement that you're signing with the franchisor. They talk about dating and sales. They're definitely going to talk about dating here with your franchisor. You really need to know the partner that you're going to be with. How long are these agreements for, by the way, Sarah, typically?
Typically, ours is 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think that is fairly typical. And I'll just whip back to that point that you've just made and almost circle back to the initial conversation about ethical franchising. As a franchisor, we will accommodate as many meetings, conversations, discussions, whatever, as is needed, as the potential franchisee feels they need to get their questions answered prior to going anywhere near signing an agreement. Because the stance is, from our point of view, and we will push back. If people say, no, we haven't got any questions, we will push back and ask them to think about questions that they really need to ask, because they need to be asked and answered prior to. So I think that's really important. And as a franchisee, you don't come to it waiting for the franchisor to go, bleh, here's everything about us. What actually you need to do is go, right, I need to know X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D. That's your responsibility as a potential franchisee.
Seriously, Sarah, I mean, it's obviously a huge, as you say, kind of jump in. Is there a way that people can get a much better sense of how the franchise operates before they make that first contract? But with also, I guess there's this balance of your current franchise, the other kind of franchisees don't want to be spending all their time potentially helping somebody that may be in their neck of the woods. I'm just kind of curious on that.
So great franchisees that we've had to come to us have been the ultimate internet stalkers. They are champions at it. They have dug deep into Sharon as CEO, me as COO. They find out who the franchisees are. Some have actually emailed franchisees before they've even had a conversation with us. The franchisees obviously are bound by a franchise agreement, so there will be certain, but there are general questions that they can answer. They look at websites, they go looking at the Facebook pages, they look at reviews, they just go and dig, and they become the ultimate brand stalker, so that they can gather as much as possible beforehand in order to find out what questions they have not had answered by what's out in the public domain. And I think that's the important bit. If you research first, you'll come up with questions that haven't been answered. And then you start in the conversations with us, at which point we will release into the network and ask people to answer those questions.
Excellent. So I think there is your permission, folks, to make sure you do, not only do a due diligence, but you have permission and you'll be a better franchisee because of it. I'm going to pass over to you, Sean. What would be your kind of top tip for somebody, particularly a tutor looking at a franchise?
Yeah, so look, the reality is, when you look at all franchises, whether it be McDonald's or a tutoring franchise, right, under the hood, they're all fairly similar. What they offer, right, is very, very similar in terms of the business stuff, right? So that releases you from having to worry about that. You know, if the numbers kind of make sense, then, you know, that's fine. I suppose I'm going to give you two. Number one, how do you figure out if the numbers make sense? Look at how much one client's going to cost you to get, and, you know, how much money you're going to make off them. Don't worry about the hundreds, right? Just figure out what one does. And the second thing is, just choose the franchise that you feel you're going to get along with the people the best. Because if you resonate, it's a horrible word, but, you know, if you feel like these are your people, you know, and given the fact that you know, the odds are that the underlying mechanism is working, because otherwise it wouldn't be a franchise in the first place in most cases, right? Go with the people that you feel are your people. And then lastly, don't ever think you're buying a car, that you turn a key, and it just drives you there, right? You are buying a bicycle. If you don't pedal, there's nothing the franchisor can do to make you successful.
Curiously, out of that, Sean, marketing is probably the number one kind of concern that most tutors have. I deal with lots of independent tutors and lots of tutoring companies. They all say the same thing, that marketing's really tough. What do you see as typical in terms of the marketing? Who's responsible for that? What's, is it digital? Is it always, is it physical? Like, is it paper-based?
Yeah, so I can,
the materials. What should they expect?
I've done a lot of research in this. We've got a marketing division that does this all day long, right? The reality is that how it works best if you're buying into a franchise as a franchisee, regardless of what the franchisor is going to tell you and their mechanism, how it works best is a franchisor does the high level brand stuff, right? So they talk about, let's use Conexus, big picture stuff, right? The brand is safe. And that's what you're saying to the parents, right? The franchisee's responsibility is local marketing, because again, there's literally no chance that a franchisor sat in Newcastle could know what marketing is going to work down in Winchester. So your responsibility as the franchisee is to get your head right and understand that marketing is hard work. You cannot sit behind a computer and expect things to happen. So the reality is that it's a combination of digital. So Facebook is very, very good for any children's sector, marketing, but not just boosting posts or things like that. You've got to like get somebody who knows what they're doing a little bit, and then you've got to complement that with physical, because there are still huge amounts of people that print off PDFs. They don't read them on the screen, right? There's a load of people who read their parish magazines. Parish magazines are probably the single most powerful piece of marketing in Britain, right? That nobody uses. Costs you a $5 sometimes to get in that little black and white thing where your ad looks all skewed and cockeyed, right? But actually just brings in clients time after time. So the reality is there's a formula for absolute success on local marketing that most franchisors are either have nailed or they are in the process of nailing. What I can tell you is, regardless, the franchise is more than likely going to beat a non-franchise in any area every day of the week.
I can totally, that was a great place to finish, Sean. And Sarah and Sean, definitely on my side, very much thank you, but I'll pass over to Sarah to finish up this session.
Which Sarah?
Oh, the Sarah look.
Okay. I was so confused there. There's always more than one. Thank you very much, because that was an amazing session, so informative. I was kind of getting a little bit lost in it, which was another reason I didn't respond to the Sarah. I was just, my mind is whirring now. Just before we move on, I want to say thank you to our sponsors today, who are Tutorbird. If you have not heard of Tutorbird, then look them up. Helen has just shared a link in the chat, which will get you a free demo, and they've got some fabulous offers on connected with Qualified Tutor and the Love Tutoring Festival. So do take the time to look them up. They've got a demo later in the day for us as well. That's going to be quite exciting. It's 60 days free. Thank you, Georgina. I do want to now introduce our next speaker. Again, really looking forward to this.